It's obvious the 2023 debaters are better. It's just mathematically true. I realized that, like, okay, it can be that hard to at least break ESL. So, from the heart, I am the greatest debater of all time. Here is why.
Welcome to a special episode of the Structural Reasons podcast. I am not your host. I am Tejas, and I'm joined by Rumen, and we're going to be interviewing the most exciting guest of all, because this is the episode where we are interviewing Niki. Niki needs no introduction, but he's a Worlds finalist, a Euros finalist, and a great person overall. I'm not going to be listing your resume, but welcome, Niki.
Thanks for having me, Tejas. It's such an honor to be on your podcast as a guest this time. Finally, let's see how it goes.
So my first question, as always, is how do you feel? And in particular, how do you feel after having hosted a very successful but surely very grueling in-person Euros?
So I already spoke with Truman about this, but I guess the funny part about it, especially in the aftermath of it all, is that in the first 4 or 5 days of after the competition itself, apart from sleeping almost 40 hours in a 48-hour window, I was still kind of in Euros mode and subconsciously dreaming and thinking about things that are supposed to happen in the tournament, and I was constantly waking up during the night thinking about finals ceremony or something else that was supposed to happen because it became such a part of the everyday life that we lived for basically a month, waking every day 6 a.m. and completely starting no coffee, anything. It was really a gruesome experience, but yeah, it was definitely interesting. Now I think it's probably the first week that I finally feel kind of normal. And I'm going to another competition in 3 days, so there's that.
How's your sleep doing?
It's okay. It's okay. I am fairly healthy right now. Mm, I stopped smoking
That's good.
finally, so let's see how it will go this time. And I go to the gym. I do some swimming, so it's uh, it's one thing that doesn't bother me so much. You just putting out the energy out there. It helps me a lot with the sleep. So most of the time I'm good, and it was fairly easy to get back to it after the first few days because the only thing that I basically did was sleep and do some work for my actual job.
Okay. How about you, Ruman?
I had a much easier adaptation back after Euros. I did not sleep 40 hours in 48 hours. But definitely, I also woke up at 3 a.m. thinking about the final ceremony, the food delivery. So I have the same paranoia after majors where I wake up thinking the analysis and thinking the case. But this time I was just thinking about the lunches, the socials, the drunk debaters that needed help getting back, the usual things. But I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Okay. So here's my first question. This is information that I got from a friend of the podcast who will remain unnamed. And this person tells me they have a screenshot from 2017 of a Facebook post from you saying that you're looking for a partner for a competition in Sofia and it will be your last debate tournament. So, my question is how many times have you retired and why?
Okay. I'm pretty sure I know what the screenshot is about. It's actually a very funny story, and it kind of maybe shows the person that I am in a way. But essentially, this was during my final year of high school, and this was basically the last, I think, high school competition that I was eligible for. And because of that, essentially, I at that part of the time I was a like national champion in Bulgaria, so I had like some type of notoriety. Like a lot of people would have wanted to speak with me on the team, apart from me being a very lovable person, of course. Uh, and modest. So essentially, what I did was I created a big retirement post that this is gonna be my last competition ever, and that I'm looking for the perfect teammate to join me along the way. And it was a long one with a link for a supposedly Google form that will actually allow you to apply for the position of being my teammate, which actually led you to being rickrolled. Which for me, if you know me, I love my rickroll memes. I always love it, and I love the song. So this is essentially what the story behind the screenshot itself. I think it's quite funny, honestly, trying to throw people, and some people didn't even realize they were being rickrolled. So that was kind of good. I've always enjoyed that one. So I guess I've I've never been so um, serious about retiring up until, well, I think there were two retirements, right? So one was officially, so always been like playing with the idea of like, oh, if I don't win the next nationals, I'm going to retire. Fuck this game, blah blah, all of these things. When I was a kid, I think the actual retirement was definitely like 2018, where uh, we were at I think Athens Open, me and Rumen and a few other people, down to the Mongols and Dario. For true fans of the podcast, they will know, or fans of Alex's speech in the Open Finals of Euros. Uh, so we went to this competition back in the back days of the dark times, the dark ages of Bulgarian debating, where we went to this international competition, which was fairly stacked at the time. We got absolutely massacred, and we didn't even know why. We were because we were like the best debaters in Bulgaria, and we were watching and prepping and doing stuff, but we couldn't really figure it out. It was very, very traumatic. And we just agreed between us that this is going to be our last competition, and we're going to never talk about it, and we're going to pretend, which we do to this day, kind of jokingly, but not so jokingly at some moments. We pretend that this never happened. We were never in Athens in 2018, and yeah, that's where I completely retired up until 2019, where I was a bit hooked again at Balkan Debate Academy that we did, and I had to ability to kind of have a conversation with the CAs and DCAs of Athens Euros back then, and it was kind of put me in the game. I can talk more about that later, I guess, which is like the what is the interlude, the pre-story of how me and Roman got back into debating. Um, but yeah, that was my first retirement, and then my second retirement officially was after Worlds, Korea Worlds, which was 2021, I believe. And I got like legit retired for like 6 months. I did no debating at all, and this is why in the that period and the 6 months after that, you'll see Rumen speaking with Alec, which is another part of the this whole TV show that is our debating career. Um, but yeah, I legit retired. Um, I basically focused on my work. It was important for me at that particular moment. I got a new job. I really liked. I still like it. And I guess it was never a I never wanted to admit that I missed the game, but I kind of missed the game because after doing HWS 6 months later, which mostly pissed me off during particular moments, although it was overall a great experience going to the US. Um, I unretired mostly out of spite in that particular moment, which is an ongoing theme of me and debating and me as a person, but it is what it is. That's how. That's the full story.
Funnily enough, me and Nikki, for the people that actually know us, know that we disagree on very specific things. I have to call this man a liar. He has retired at least 10 times. Do not believe what you're hearing. These two are probably the most memorable, but at least we had 10 situations where this has happened. And the routine during any online major between me and him, not even major, just random big tournament would be, why don't we just give up? Why don't we just stop debating right now, walk away, go to the gym, do something like that? So this has happened more than 2 times. Don't believe this man.
That's what my anonymous source told me as well.
These are the two times I actually went through it. So the other
Yeah.
times was just trying to complain about debating, but it is an occurring theme. I would have to admit.
So I want to ask you about two elements of your life that are not debating to begin with, before we jump into debate stories. One of them is music. As I understand it, you play the guitar. As I understand it from previous episodes, you play in a band. How did that come about? When did you start? And I guess one more interesting thing is there any way that interacts with debating? Like I know many debaters like Hamza play music in between rounds to calm themselves down, or they sort of connect those two elements of their life. Do you view them as completely unconnected? How do these two elements of your life interact?
Okay, so I guess one thing I was never in a band, and I'm not in a band. That's Milsh. Uh, but I was technically in an orchestra when I was in the eighth grade. With I was doing um, the trumpet for a while, and something called bass something. I don't even know how it's called. I tried that shit, and the funny story, I guess, from that period is I stopped because my music teacher basically caught me playing smoke on the water on the instrument because I was getting bored of the classical shit, and she made a big deal out of it. It was like, "Oh, you shouldn't do this," blah blah, and I was like, "Fuck you," and I quit because of that. But yeah, I don't know. Like I've always liked music a lot. I listen to a lot of music all the time, anytime. For me, it's kind of like if I'm doing something and I'm not interacting with somebody, or I'm not um, having to hear my surroundings, it is actually like very weird for me to not have any music. And this is why like I heavily invest into making sure that whatever I do, I have the ability to listen to music, including like when I swim, I have to listen to music. I can just swim and do that. I'm gonna get absolutely flabbergasted if I don't listen to anything. And obviously that means that throughout time I have a lot of listening hours, and I have a wide variety of big music taste. And I haven't met somebody that has better music taste than me, mostly because I have a good collection of something to listen to for any type of occasion, but also any type of music in general. So I feel pretty confident on that particular part. Um, Again, with the modesty, but it is what it is. So I also I do play the guitar. I'm not great at it, but I can do some stuff. Mostly started for like trying to get girls and stuff. Seems like I liked it, so I kind of stuck with it. But also the biggest part I enjoy is mostly singing and a little bit songwriting. For me it's mostly like a big hobby. I haven't really thought about it like serious, but I do have like probably 20 some written songs that are like actual songs. They haven't been like properly recorded. It's mostly just acoustic versions of the songs, but they are original. They're written and performed by me, and it's a good hobby to have in general. Now, when it comes to comparing it to debating and like how it influences, I think it's great because it has nothing to do with debating. It's like a personal experience, and there isn't a crowd or something like that. So that's uh, it's good to have something like that because debating is connected with a lot of like external pressures, how people are gonna view you, people listening to you, people adjudicating you every round and things like that. So for me, it's good to have something that it's only for yourself, not really the point of like being judged or something like that. And also, um, I think the part that I mostly enjoy about debating is when you can get lost in the moment, and it's something that you fill out a speech or a part of a speech or an example or a particular argument that you're making. With music, it's like that 100% of the time. That's what it's about. It's there isn't any particular structure that you need to follow, any particular way that you're supposed to do it, and that's why I particularly enjoy about it. And I think specifically it has helped me kind of calm down, get in another place, and also um, mm, gain some quick perspective on life in terms of like, okay, I just started stressing about this next round, but then I realized there's many other things that I enjoy in life that have no connection to debating, and in fact, debating is just. I think I like Milosh explains it, where it's like the stakes are so high in debating, but at the same time they are not, and it's like it's so real for you, but in reality it's not. So while it's still gonna hurt when you fall down, the ability to pick yourself up is always gonna be very big, because in reality it's not gonna influence you that badly. You're still gonna probably gonna feel bad about yourself if you really care about it, but that's a position where you can come out of, as opposed to other positions in life where there are external factors that you don't have any control over, and this is where things are worse. So it kind of teaches you a lot about life, and from that perspective it has helped me as well. That's my answer.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I just have one small digression about music. You said you're very good at picking music according to the context or the mood. What was your guys' walk on music for the world's final, and how did you end up picking it? What did it mean to you?
Oh, uh, there were multiple songs. There are multiple songs. Uh, we ended up going with a Serbian song, which was kind of like about the Balkans. I can maybe link the song later or something like that. Can I put it on the screen? Doesn't matter. But it's basically a Serbian song about the Balkans. And the main lyric goes like living in the Balkans, živim na Balkanu. And I don't know, I think we ended up going with that because we kind of like at that moment, at least that's how it was for me, but I guess Rumen agreed to it, so it doesn't matter. But I felt like appreciative of the whole community. I felt supported, so wanted to go with that. The initial plans was to go with 90s turbo folk, mafia music from Bulgaria that is completely different from this, but it's it's part of our reality. So we kind of wanted that was the initial plan of going out with the song. Uh, so something along those lines. So I guess these are two songs. They're not really connected to my character, but maybe like the good example of uh, how I overthink this particular stuff is exactly the process of going from the Mafia Balkan song, which we really enjoyed, to actually Živim na Balkanu, which was my idea and was like in my head it was some type of a big gesture of choosing that particular song, even though people probably didn't care about it, but from my perspective, it felt right and correct to be exactly that particular song. And yeah, I think there is one song that is very connected to me and Roman for a completely random reason, and it's Electric Avenue. I forgot the artist, but it has like this very specific start, and I used to play it every single day of Worlds, and it became an ongoing theme. And at this point, I think it's like so entrenched into our minds, because I am always trying to creating these musical moments, regardless of where we are. That like it always like puts you in that position, at least when I hear the song, of like doing the thing, getting out there, fighting for this debate or fighting for getting Euros. So it's good because I think you can very easily connect memories and situations with music, and make this type of associations, and it's really good to have it on back of your mind, and when you go back to the song, actually remember the memories. That makes sense.
Yeah. So in fact, one of my playlists is called Memories, and it's basically a chronological order of songs that I associate with different parts of my life. I have about 100 songs, and whenever I want to sort of revisit or imagine a particular part, I just go to that playlist and go to that particular part of the playlist. So I definitely relate to that. The other part of your life that, in fact, I got many audience members wanting to hear about is management consulting. So I'm curious how you transitioned from like being a law student or legal work to management consulting, how you find it. Uh, an audience member tells me you have a very successful career that you really enjoy. So how did you build that? I guess independent of debating, but if you want to add things or ways that debating helped you with it, that would be cool as well.
So the honest answer, which is gonna maybe feel like a random Andrew Tate podcast answer, is that I have a lot of both. I never in my life, and I've been in the situations where I had to not only like in terms of like scamming myself to employers or things like that, but really just realizing when something is not for you, and not staying in the moment, but actually like taking a leap of faith and things like that. I'm gonna explain the full picture, but this is like the capture grab answer that I wanted to give. So I started studying law. I worked in law for 2.5 years, 3 years, something like that. While I was studying, I was essentially what's the word? What's the word for for it?
Intern
Stajant.
trainee, something like that. Intern trainee.
Yeah, inter trainee, whatever. So I did that. I really hated it. It was like very tedious work, not type of work that I particularly enjoyed, especially in the context of Bulgaria. So, especially during COVID, it really got into my head, and I started like that's how I am, at least. But I always like think of, okay, am I actually going to be able to do this for the next 5 years, 10 years, or something down the line? And I realized that's never going to happen, and just the thought of this made me really, really sad and depressed, and I was actively depressed about it. So I just essentially quit my job without having any particular plan. I had some ideas, but I didn't really have a next job lined up. Um, and at that time, I started like doing. I was in an NGO, which was 180 degrees consulting, which is like essentially you do management consulting for NGOs pro bono, and you're like with a team and things like that. So I did like 2 years of that. Firstly, being on a team, then leading a team, and it got me a lot of experience, like working with different NGOs that were kind of business like. I always like kind of tethered more around those. Gave me a lot of valuable experience on the side while doing law. And then through this, I like some people. that were involved into that NGO kind of helped me get a job into that particular space. I did that for a year, and then another opportunity in renewable energy opened up. Uh, so again, like it was a moment of like I was in a pretty good position already. A lot of stuff were about to happen, but again, I took a leap of faith. Of I mean, I also like to be honest, I did follow the money as well uh, throughout the whole experience. But it was also a leap of faith of like a vibe of how I was feeling the people, the place, and yeah, this is how I landed where I currently am, where I started more of an like an analyst position, and now I've mostly moved to the communications part of it, which I particularly enjoy, and obviously like is the most intuitive for me and my particular skill set. So it's been working out fairly well, and it's also a place where I can say we are at least a little bit making the world a better place, or not actively harming it like many others. So I guess that's the full timeline. I was just always on the lookout for the next thing, always ready to jump ahead, and I never listened to what people were telling me to do, which was just stay there, be secure. It's gonna happen. The big reward is coming, and all of those bullshit, which I think in most of the cases is really case specific to your whole particular situation, but also it's kind of like a comfortability mechanism for people to just not do anything because they're expecting something to happen. In today's capitalistic world, I think that's a bad idea. I think you should be always one step ahead of the market if possible, and good things are gonna happen to you.
You have to understand something very important. This man does this while not having a degree, while still being in university, and despite all odds of society telling you, "Oh, you need the plaster, the piece of paper to do all this stuff," he just does it. But the other thing, which I assume maybe for audiences from different geographical places, would be interesting for them to understand this. We are very poor here. Like we may not be as poor as, let's say, the global south or a place like this, but we are the poorest country in the EU. So it's pretty normal for us, to not stay, with our hands in our pockets. And while we're studying, like literally most of the time, we had jobs. We had to survive on our own, and that's usually where, if someone wonders like where the Bulgarian drive comes from, where we do all these things, this is because we didn't have a lot of options. We basically had to fend for ourselves, and yeah. So I guess that's the cherry on top of the cake for this story.
That makes sense. So I want to jump now into debating. And in particular, as I understand it, you started debating in school in 2014. So how did that begin? What is your debating origin story? How did you get into debating and why did you keep at it for a fairly long time?
So the debating origin story was so I was at some courses, um, which was basically like teaching you how to think. That was like in the sixth grade or something. And basically the goal of the course was to teach you how to write essays with a logical structure, and essentially like writing an essay is like making an argument, or somewhat of a debate speech, even you can say. Obviously, like I didn't have the concept for this, but one of the exercises that their teachers did was like debates. So it's not really debates, but it's like somebody grab a point and the other person grab another point, and you kind of say why your point is good and why the other person's point was not so good. And kind of competing ideas around the same topic of the essay, and I really enjoyed that. Like I specifically remember that I really enjoyed that, and I was very good at it. Like intuitively against the other small sixth graders, I completely destroyed them. They had no chance at this particular exercise. So I guess that happened. So now the interesting story here. I'm not even sure that even Rumen knows this, but so I'm in the sixth grade, and at that point, I'm living in a small town in Bulgaria. Still, my parents go bankrupt, and now I have to, because of that, move to Sofia, which is the capital city, where I am originally from, but I haven't lived there for the last almost 10 years. So I kind of moved back, and I don't know anybody because I haven't lived there for the last 10 years and everything. I go to my new school, and I still have this idea of this particular exercise that we called debating uh, on the back of my head, and I had like a intuitive need to do it again. I don't know if that makes sense. So I actually went to the dean of my new school and I was like, I want to create this as a club or something. They were like, what the fuck is this? What is a debate club? We don't know shit about this. Fine, if you want to do it, do it. Just we're not gonna give you any money or anything. And I grabbed just like 5 or 6 friends that's also wanted to do this, and we made like a debate club, and we didn't really do shit, but we kind of used the talking points that I did from that course to spout out some shit and to do some exercises. It wasn't successful, but the funny part of it is that during exact that time, the what we now know as the official Bulgarian Debate Association was being created, and the first wave of events that are like large scale were happening. Debating goes back a while in Bulgaria, but that was like one of the big starting points. So I guess like I had the same idea, but they did it first, you know, and now we're all on the same page. And that's just like I've always thought it's an interesting introspect into how it all came to be. And after that, like when I went to high school, I actually for the first year was too shy to actually go to debating because a lot of still stuff were happening. I was not a very like I was very insecure kid. I didn't know what to do with my life, where to find new friends. It was completely new environment, so I actually didn't have the courage to go to the debate club, even though one of the reasons I signed up to this particular high school was that I knew that they had a debate club. And it actually took a lot of time over the next year to go on ahead and do it. And I think after that, whole is history. Like starting to go to Bulgarian competitions, meeting essentially all of my friends right now, including Rumen, over the years, and kind of finding my people, you know, which was very important to me. Like I very much cherish debating because I found my own people. This is like the biggest part of it. Like my tribe, the people who I can hang with, who are not typical for the environment that we live in, and kind of are interested into talking about ideas, have their own ideas, and are not really moving with the current, but rather in their own way, if that makes sense. So that's how it all started and how it came to be the short one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Someone recently asked me like why I stayed debating in college, and basically it's because all my friends are debaters. So in a sense, me finding debating was also like for the first time finding a group of people who wanted to be friends with me when I was a little kid. Um, I guess I'm curious about your growth as an individual at this stage because I'm curious. Like you're clearly the type of person with a sort of drive to get a lot better throughout this, and presumably you had this drive for a big part of that period. So what were you doing, especially because you had to balance, first setting up a debate club and then moving to a new school, moving to a new city? Were you trying to get better? Was this a big part of what you were doing? Were you working on debating? I'm curious about that side of things while all of this was going on as well.
So while I'm naturally talented about debating, I think I'm actually one of those types of people. And it's not because like I'm trying to make a joke or I'm not modest or things like that. I just think that like there are certain types of things that I click a lot with debating. While I say this, it's important to note that this was only useful to me in the very first stages of debating. So I was immediately better than my peers who also just started debating. But then there was quickly a serious gap between me and other people who either had been doing this for a while or were naturally inclined about other stuff and were very smart in general. So it did help me a lot in the beginning, but then when I actually found out people that were very good at it, it took me a while to really catch up. And I still had to really do the work, even though I had this natural inclination towards debating. So I'm saying this because it's kind of like at first it hooked me on because it was easy, it was cool, and I was winning, and then quickly it became about like a heartbreak moment of like, oh shit, I want to be like those guys. um and like I always tell this story of like two good friends of mine, but which was like my first two serious debate partners, are Josetto and Vokata, who are in my high school. And while we are very good friends right now, uh, they weren't really good at expressing their frustrations with debating back at that stage. So we would go to this nationals World Schools competition in Bulgaria, which was back in 2014. And I remember for the whole competition, they kept telling me, I mean, maybe at least this is from my perspective and how I remember it, but they kept telling me what I should change about my speeches, how I particularly fucked up this round or that round. And up to that point, I had lost a lot of my initial confidence in debating because I had a period of like a year or something that after going to a few competitions I realized I wasn't really good and I didn't really do that well. And I guess at that point it was very funny because I completely like was in this point of like, okay, I'm just still learning, I'm not really good at debating, I'm just gonna follow these two guys who are older and taller than me. um, and yeah, I ended up like being like third best speaker of the competition, making the finals, and outspeaking them both, which obviously meant I was on the right side of history. Um, and that was fun. That was definitely fun. It was kind of my own like show you moment, fuck you moment, and from that point on, I regained some of the confidence that I particularly needed because I am not naturally confident, but for me, being confident is important for my mental health and for how I go about life. So I always strive to have that confidence be based on something. So it's not just completely fake confidence. So in order to not be fake and not be completely fake it till make it, this was like an important moment of like going back to it. So yeah, I think to kind of like keep it shorter on this question, it's it was really just about realizing what I am and then striving to be better. But if you look at the whole journey, it was really huge ups and downs throughout the whole of it. And it actually took me a lot of time to really get to understand debating, especially because like at that time there wasn't really a good idea of what debating is and how we should debate in Bulgaria as a whole. And Rumen knows about that as well. I'm not gonna like bore people with Bulgarian lore, but we definitely don't have the right resources and understanding, especially as compared to right now. Um, so it took me a while, and what I can say is that it was, especially after the first year, it was definitely a focus. That's something that I strive to perform at, but over the times there were periods where I didn't look at debating as like the most important thing in my life. Was kind of up and down the ladder, but it it stayed with me. And I'm a person that really gets bored out of things and moves on to the next one. So the fact that it stayed with me all these years is actually a pretty big deal. I don't have an equivalent of something in my life that happened this way, apart maybe from music. And with that, again, it's been kind of on and off to a certain extent. I guess I hope that answers the question, or at least it's entertaining.
So I want to, I guess, move into two sort of turning points in your debate career after school. So one of them, and you mentioned this briefly earlier, is do you want to tell me about your first tournament with Rumen? I think it was UCL in 2018. You mentioned it briefly. So what was it like partnering with Rumen for the first time? I know you weren't like building a debate partnership. You were just like doing one competition together. How did you find it debating with Rumen for the first time? And would you have expected that you would eventually become like a serious two times worlds partnership?
No, absolutely no. But it was very typical me and Roman like debate moment in competition. For some weird reason, when we prep, we really believe each other. Like it's like it's either we truly believe each other or we don't believe each other at all. There is no middle ground, no middle scenario, and we somehow like in the worst particular moments, if we are on the same page, it actually means very bad, and it always go bad for us if we're on the same page. And the first round of this particular competition is exactly that scenario. And here is the funny part of it. So um, I'm gonna shock the audience. Me and Rumen are not necessarily the most let's say mm, liberal leaning in general. And so, especially as kids, we were more edgy. Um, and so we go to London for the first time, or for to a big Iona competition, and we, as any other edgy kid who is not particularly liberal, is like, these liberals here, they only debate about from the liberal point of view. We don't care. We're gonna make right wing cases, blah blah blah. And with that context, we go into round one, and we get this motion, which is essentially about what should the Democratic Party do. I don't even remember the exact wording of it. It doesn't matter. And we are opening opposition. OG stands up, and for 14 minutes they talk about what's gonna be good for um, the Democratic Party, and we are like, huh, these Iona liberals are already assuming that debate should be won with what is the best for the Democratic Party. We're gonna stand up and tell them that we don't care about that. We care about other priorities and people and stuff like that. And we stand up and do that. Turns out that never in whole prep or in the whole debate round we never catch up on the fact that the motion is this house as the Democratic Party would do X, Y, or Z. And throughout the whole debate, we were like, we were feeling like we were complete outsiders of this Iona world, an ongoing theme that you might think about in these things. But yeah, why are these people only talking about the Democratic Party? That's how it all started, and we actually got the third place. So poor people who got that fourth in that round. I don't even remember what they ran, but yeah, I guess it was definitely something. So that's that's like a very. I don't think there are any other highlights debating wise from this tournament, but yeah, this definitely encapsulates what happens. And throughout the years, we've even like before Euros. I remember that round one where me and Roman again like sit in prep time with all the confidence in the world, and it's a motion on university education or something. We're gonna like university education sucks. We're gonna run an argument about how this will remove university education, even though it's a motion about how to make university education better. And never, because it's like this specific niche thing that we are both very like have a strong opinion about, that we never self-check one another, and we end up running like the dumbest shit ever, and somehow getting the second uh, through me realizing that we are in a very bad position and scamming Miloš out of a second somehow, some way. But it was, yeah, I think this is like ongoing theme with us. It happened again at Worlds around four, which you were a part of, where like Rumen had this crazy economic argument, and we ended up arguing so much about it in prep time that I convinced myself that it's like the smartest shit ever, and like Rumen is economics genius basically. And even after Rumen gave the worst speech of Worlds, and one of his worst speeches, I would say, in the build up to Worlds, when he sat down, I was like, that was an 87, bro. It was greatest speech ever. And I proceeded to whip what I believe to be the greatest speech ever, only to get a 79 speaks and my worst speech ever at the competition. But hey, even through that, we still broke first. So they
You
hate
could
us
say
because
this
they
is our
ate us.
first. You could say this is our first devil ever. It's the first. It's the original sin that we that we encountered. But yeah,
For
So,
sure, for sure.
but the other follow up I have to this turning point is I hear that after Athens Euros, you were trying to find a partner to be with, and I heard that Rumen was your fourth choice, but the first to say yes. So tell me how that partnership built up after Athens Euros, or how you ended up becoming debate partners.
Okay. Um, so yeah, briefly, the story is already said like I had quit debating or like international debating at that point because it was like I never really got into it and understood how it worked. And so after like getting convinced to go to Athens and seeing Athens, and this is something that like I gave a speech about at Black Sea UDC, and it resonated with some people. Is that when I went to Athens UDC 2019, like I didn't know anybody, I didn't break. I wasn't part of any like big debate cliques, and it was not a specifically great experience for me. But I was still able to enjoy what the debating community had to offer to a certain extent. Like I didn't have the time of my life, but I still enjoyed certain moments of it, like break night, people shouting each other's names and things like that. And I just realized that like what I've been doing and enjoying so far, there are many more people out there in the world that also have the same interests, and it kind of felt like another moment of finding my people, if that makes sense. So after that, I was pretty much convinced that I want to like at least try doing it. And from the conversations that I've had with like Mush and some other people at that point, um, I realized that like, okay, it can be that hard to at least break ESL. Like if we put a lot of work into it, we should be able to at least break ESL. That was my whole concept. So I I immediately thought of two people, and the first one was Dario, which was the other person at Athens UDC. So at that point, like I didn't have a lot of people in mind because I knew that most of the debaters from Bulgaria that I knew, most of them didn't really want to continue debating and they were completely off with it. But I know the people that we went to Athens with, there was a sour taste in our mouth, but at the same time we were still going to some competitions. We were like kind of like subconsciously looking for that experience, even though we kept failing. So I went to Dario. He like we had a conversation. He was like, "No, no, like I don't want to deal with this anymore. I have to like move on with my life." That's fine. And then the second person that I went to was Rumen, and to my surprise, he was like more interested to it. So then I proceeded to scam him, and this is like the whole meme of like how I gave him essentially five reasons or structural reasons as to why we should do debating. And I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, believe that uh, our goal should be at least breaking ESL at Euros. And if we can manage to do that, then that's something that we can be proud of. And it's going to be fun doing it, going to the competition and traveling and doing that stuff. And this was like right before COVID, like maybe 6 months before COVID or something like that. So little did we know our life was about to change, not only in a debate way.
This man
But yeah,
promised
that's
me
how it all started.
this is this man promised me to go to Kazakhstan, to go to Korea. I saw none of that. So as you can see, master scammer right here. But yeah, but I saw Madrid. Okay, like I saw the neighboring country. But yeah, he did give five reasons. They were very persuasive at the time when we couldn't give two reasons. So it was quite the feat.
And look where we at
um,
right now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Started from the bottom, now we here. So, I before we get to the pandemic, I want to ask you about Oxford 2019, which was your, I guess, your first sort of breakthrough on the international stage, or how people started to know you guys as a team. So, I want to ask about what the story of Oxford 2019 was, what the build-up was, and I also want to hear how you got a pair of 69s and still broke. As this is a tale of debate legend at this point.
Oh, dude. Okay. So first of all, like we barely managed to fund that. I don't even remember how we funded that trip. To be honest, like I know that my parents helped me out and stuff, but like I just remember that it was a lot of um, like it felt like a financial burden doing the whole thing there, which is a feeling that I haven't had in a while. So it's kind of interesting to think about, but yeah, that was kind of part of it, and sleeping on floors and things like that, and why I fucking hate Oxbridge, the institutions, not the people, especially because for that type of money at that particular point, I could have gone to like maybe two or three debate competitions in the Balkans and actually have a much better experience. Uh, but I actually like I slept on the floors. I got fucking sick. Uh, I was really bad and I had to fly back and it was yeah, it was not a great experience, like just physically from that perspective, because we went to Cambridge also in that year. The competition itself, so we had zero expectations. We hadn't had like I think this was like we did only UCL, which is like years ago basically. We did some like prep rounds, but mostly we're just like watching a lot of workshop and stuff. I remember like having books with written workshops in them and things like that. So we did we did prep, I think especially individually a lot. at that particular point. We went to Oxford. It was like a bad environment, but the base wise, it was interesting. So first round we start the competition, and of course, what happens is that our chair gets rowed completely, which means the wings saw the debate completely the other way around. So from first we go fourth by the chair getting rolled. This is like our official first round at a debate competition, of course. Um, then we won a round, which was like about Putin and Russia, something like that. Then the third round was the this particular round where I think Archie Ho or like something Archie, which was back then a DCA of Worlds, I think American. I don't really particularly know the person, so I don't know, but I remember he looked like an asshole. I'm not sure if he's an asshole. So it is what it is. But he definitely didn't give us the best speaks ever in that round. Not only us, but like everybody in the round, because you have to understand, we got a pair of 69s or 6970, and we were second in the round. We were second and got 69-70, and this was like was not a complete bin room of it was
No,
like a
no,
3 point
it
room or
was the
something like
fourth.
that.
It was the fourth room of the tournament, bro. At that time, we were at
Oh, really?
+2 at that time, or maybe
Aha.
it
Okay.
was one, something like that.
Yeah, so I'm maybe, yeah, because I remember there were some good teams there for sure, and like people are like, what the fuck is going on? How do we get these picks? But anyway, like there are two fun stories about Oxford after this. The one is that we so didn't believe that we were gonna break open or something like that, that we actually opted out of breaking open because we felt like the chance of breaking open is like 0.1%, and if this actually happens, it will be like some teams fuck up or something like that. We're literally joking about it. So we were like, if that happens, we're gonna have zero chance. We're not even gonna be in the debate. It's gonna be like total humiliation. So might as well opt out of it and not even think about it. And we didn't even think about it like that big of a deal, because we didn't like we were never around. We didn't realize what's the point behind it and things like that. So we just opted out of open. Um, what ended up happening is that we actually broke open, and we weren't even one of the last teams. We were like 10th or something like that, and a few teams that were much more rapier actually broke below us. And I specifically remember that one of the teams in the finals actually was the last breaking team, which basically meant that if we didn't opt out of open, they wouldn't have broken at all, and actually made it to the final. So I think that's kind of a funny story. And I definitely like remember it was like a huge like disbelief, and we can't. Oh my gosh, we are actually breaking so high, blah blah. It was very funny. The second part of this, which I think is even funnier, and it kind of encapsulates something that maybe a lot of current debaters, especially after like Euros being so ESL dominated, is they can't conceptualize, is the fact that me and Rumen broke fairly okay open, made it to the ESL finals and stuff like that, and we were 100 and something in the top. I was, I think, like Rumen is, I think, 150. Like I can't find the top, but like a lot of people who were there will definitely confirm this. Roman was like 150, and I was like 120, or even lower than this, or it was like well into the hundreds of speakers. Not only because of that round, we won some pretty high rounds and still received like very bad speaks, which was very interesting to me. It's ongoing theme with my debate career where I don't receive a lot of speaks. Um, and I think even back then we debated in the same configuration which we do right now. So
You
not
you
much has
forgot
changed. We
the
get fucked,
you
fucked on speaks.
you forgot the most important
Yeah,
story,
go ahead.
however, which is that when they said that we break while we were standing on the benches, Niki basically literally jumps up and go and literally makes a jump and we start screaming, our chant at the time Bulgar Nazi at the whole Oxford chamber, because we were in this much disbelief that that happened. And actually, the second nice thing was that the other two Bulgarians that were with us then, Sofia B, Janin and Ratko, they also broke sixth, which was sixth ESL, which was very nice. So this was one of the emotions and the adrenaline that I felt then. I've only felt like two more times in debating that I did then. It felt like literally breaking a ceiling when you break at that tournament.
That makes sense. I want to jump now to Astana Euros. So I guess obviously you guys had some like hard times in the lead up and during Euros prep, and then you ended up breaking and doing reasonably well at Astana Euros. So I'm curious what your mental game was like in the lead up to Euros, or how you sort of managed the Euros prep tournaments and those results, and went into Euros with some positivity and ended up doing well.
Bro, I don't remember being extremely positive about it. Like I wasn't depressed or anything, but I definitely didn't feel extremely confident that we're gonna break that Euros. Uh, Having in mind, so the only positives were a few. So we've mostly not broken at any competitions before Euros, like basically uh, almost like 20 competitions, almost no breaks, ESL or open, or very few ESL ones. And most of the time in like spars, we would be third or fourth, third or fourth, third or fourth, every single time. The only two instances that I specifically remember, maybe Rumen believes more, or like maybe there's three instances of hope, of light in the tunnel. The first one was Rafi Marshall, who judged us a random round at a debate competition that we didn't break at, but actually later on told to Milvush that he thinks we're gonna break at Euros, which was completely random. But it's like Rafi Marshall, like, what the fuck, nice, thank you for the compliment, but still, like, it was just up in the air. The second light in the tunnel was there was one judge, I'm not gonna name them, but every time, every single time, and they used to judge a lot of spars back in that period. Every single times, give us the fourth, give us the fourth, the fourth, the fourth. Maybe sometimes the third, but the fourth, the third, the fourth, the third, mostly the fourth. And right before Euros, they gave us the second. This was the first time that it happened. We were like, yes, we made it. We're ready. If with this judge we can take the second, anything is possible. Um, so this was the other light in the tunnel. And I think the third light in the tunnel was that what I had the idea of is that, and like, okay, it's not a great way to look at debating for sure, but in my mind I felt like a lot of these tournaments and sparse, we weren't getting good judges consistently. We would get some good judges some of the time and still fuck up and deservedly lose. But it also a lot of times felt like, although we weren't as good, where now we can deal with some of these judges and it was a learning experience, it still felt like we were getting robbed at certain points. Especially like some certain key debates where it would mean not breaking or something like that. So I always had that feeling. And when we actually had around, I think right before Euros, with Kevin and Jack, who like a lot of people in Europe will know, but they were essentially like one of the top dogs in Europe at the time, and they were winning and uh, in the finals of a lot of these competitions, and we were having like a small rivalry with them because they debate very differently than us. They're like TCD, philosophical arguments, blah blah blah, cool accents and stuff. And we actually beat them. And this time Milos was judging, which was like, we were like, okay, it's Milos, but also like Milos is pretty fair. He doesn't care about this stuff. So if he thinks it's the right call, it's most likely the right call. So that was like some boost of confidence. So this is how I think, for me at least, how I rationalized it and went into Euros and was like, I'm not gonna have high hopes, but there were some moments of enlightenment, and maybe this is a time that is going to happen for us. And we started out pretty well, so it kind of built up. And I think like at that moment, like one of the highlights is definitely like when we actually at round 8 got to the top room of Euros, which we never truly believed we could ever do. Again, like with the context of we only do this to maybe break ESL. Um, it was definitely a lot of emotion. No, and if you can go back and watch that round, we do a pretty okay case, but you can see that we are kind of in another headspace than all of these other teams. It obviously feels like all of these other teams, they were good teams, but it was just another good debate for them or something like that. For us, it was very important. It was a small moment of realization of like, okay, our hard work is being paid off in the moment. And I think like at that point is fun. Like when the debate starts and Roman starts his speech, I think we talked about it that he would do it if we get there. And Roman started his speech of like, for 7 rounds I've been waiting to get to the top room of Euros and do this. So I think it's definitely been fun. And then I have uh, like how can I say, a not so pleasant exchange with one of the again top teams at that Euros from the Netherlands, um, which I think they basically say, this is all recorded, so you guys can go watch it. Like round 8 of Athens Odyssey, and I think they say, uh, well, we've been to multiple rounds in the top room of Euros already, so blah 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 blah. They kind of responded to Roman's intro, and then I was like. I started my speech was like, well, for somebody who has been multiple times uh, in the top room of Euros, I would expect for them to know how to rebut principled arguments, but I guess they didn't, and they ended up taking the fourth. We got the second, so start from the bottom. Now we're here.
And how did it feel to break open? If you were targeting breaking ESL, and this time you didn't, you chose the open break. So what was the thinking that went behind that?
I mean, at Euros, it's a double break, it's a parallel, so you don't have to
Oh,
choose.
it's a double break. That makes sense.
Yeah. So the both rounds happen. We knew after being in the top room that we probably had good chances. Um,
Hmm.
so we're kind of starting to mentally prepare ourselves for the out rounds. The problem with all of this was that essentially for us it was so about just breaking, because for us like that was the big goal, just actually breaking, that we were so mentally and physically exhausted before getting to the out rounds that we essentially crumbled in both of our out rounds and outright lost. In We didn't go deep at all. um, it was just funny how like at the same time we achieved everything, and then right at the next doorstep we completely failed once again. So it's just like a moment of like acknowledgement of your hard work, and then a big slap of you still have a lot of bread to eat. Is how we say it in Bulgaria. So it was definitely um, an enlightening experience to say the least. Uh, Once again, I think we drank like each of us like 9 Red Bulls for 3 days in the first 3 days of Euros. So by the fourth one, we were completely destroyed. Was just like out of it. And if you can find out rounds of us back then, you can definitely see it. But it was definitely a learning experience. And one small reward that we had was that even though it was COVID, a lot of our friends came to my house to this very room, which you can see in that debate video. And we had like a small break night party with them celebrating because for them it was also like, oh shit, these guys that we know that we debated back in the day actually did this thing, which in our day we felt like it was just a dream or something completely out of reach. So it was cool to have that exchange as well.
So here's an interesting question. Definitely an important milestone in your life. It's a joke. Do you remember when we first met, like online, by any chance? Not
You have
Rumen, just
to.
Nikki and I. I met her later. So we
No.
judged round one of Oxford IB 2020 together. We judged round one of Oxford IB 2020 together. Uh,
Oh, I
I don't.
completely don't remember that one. How did it go? Let me know. Was it bad?
I think no, I don't. I don't remember much of the details at all. I think you were paneling me, and it was my first tournament judging. I was like just out of school or something. I don't like, and then I think we had different initial calls for the first and second, but we agreed on everything else. And then I think we had a conversation, and then came to a unanimous call. And the unanimous call was giving an American team the win over a European team. I don't remember who the teams were. I'm sure I can check the tab or something, but I distinctly remember there were some Americans. At this point, I'd not even visited the US before, right? I was just in India. I'd never even been to the US. Um, and I just remember giving the win to this American team that I had not really heard of. Uh, but that's what I remember. I remember we had a conversation about comparing an American and a European team, and this was the first time we had ever interacted. So I guess I'm curious, why did you decide to judge Oxford IB, or how was your like? How do you approach judging generally? Do you like it? Were you doing it as a favor?
That Oxford TV, like something came up, I remember, and I had to go out early. One specific thing that I remember about it, which is more spicy, is that I remember that once again Oxford and Cambridge decided to fuck over the debating community. So what they did was they created the online versions of Oxford and Cambridge IV. Then they for a online tournament back in the day, they charged a bunch of money again, and uh, the worst thing that they did was actually offer like extremely measly amount of money to IAs, which was like 10 or 20 pounds to some people for the whole debate competition. I remember that my offer was for like 15 or 20 pounds for judging all of the rounds and then potentially breaking and judging more. Um, and I remember that some even better judges were also giving same money like that. So just mentioning that part of how far things have gone and still somewhat the same. Just to mention if anybody's interested. So that's one part I want to because I just remembered it once I talked about this competition. Now, in terms of judging, so I don't enjoy judging more than speaking. That's never going to happen. It's impossible. I'm too much of an egocentric for anything else to be true. Like I need to have the validation of beating somebody, and I need to have the performance element of it. And a lot of my OAs sometimes have little performances of them where I would make a joke where I shouldn't. Not equity wise, but maybe just in terms of not really helping me explain things better, but rather just being a funny observations that I had within the round. So that's always gonna be this way. I still learned to enjoy it a little bit more. I started doing it more when Rumen was speaking with Alec in order to essentially get better at whipping and doing second speeches and understanding the debate. And it really helped me with that. So I had like some appreciation for it, especially after doing worlds and breaking there. It was very good for me to do that before actually going and speaking at Euros. So that's great. uh, and I've mostly now been enjoying. So I hate IAing, if I have to be honest, uh, but I do like seeing and coming up with motions and coming up with songs for the motion. And kind of, I feel like I don't really. It's a team in my life. I have no true respect for authority, and I don't particularly care for like specific things that are unwritten rules in debating that you have to completely follow. So I always like try to test out different stuff and motions. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, but it's part of the process. But I feel like I am still trying to put my own creative spin on doing motions and coming up with ideas, uh, which I think is good. So I enjoyed that part of it, and then like it makes judging much better when I have some control over what I'm actually gonna be listening at this particular tournament, as opposed to going to a tournament where I'm judging, I can't even speak, and I don't particularly like the motion set of that team. Which is like I was fine with Belgrade WDC because I mostly end up liking a lot of the motions that Miłosz sets. So that was easy. But yeah, not better than speaking, but has a lot of fun and potential, especially at this stage where I've done a lot with speaking, and it's kind of a different challenge to go about it with the CRO.
So I guess the next phase of your debating is, of course, Korea Worlds and your next fake retirement. So I guess I'm curious how you thought Korea Worlds went, and what was it like to make it to quarters, and then in addition, like what was the period after Korea Worlds like, and what led you to come out of retirement?
I think Korea Worlds we learned our lesson. We didn't over caffeinate ourselves. This is where like all of the music stuff started. Electric Avenue song being played out every day. I think the funny part about that Worlds was it absolutely felt like Groundhog Day. We basically did the same thing over and over every day of Worlds in the prep to Worlds. I think it had like a little different schedule because it has like two rounds the first day or something like that. It was something weird like that. Maybe I don't remember correctly, but maybe I do. But anyway, this is kind of the point, right? I don't remember how it all went. It all felt like the same day happening over and over again. Um, we got a lot of good judging, so we won a lot of debates. Uh, we weren't great, but we had our moments. I think some of the highlights were definitely so the Octo finals, which at that point, like it's now I think notoriously one of our definitely best recorded debates. We are fairly good at that comp, and I've seen a lot of people do a lot of our AI arguments on this particular way from that stage. I think like the moment matters because we are basically low breaking open team versus like one of the top breaking open teams, and what we're about to find out, one of the top two of the top 10 open speakers. And like this is to nothing against them, but in that particular round we destroy them. We absolutely annihilate that particular round. I think like Mush told us that we would probably get something like 86s in that particular round, and back then where we are averaging 80s, that's a lot. So it was a big jump. So that's like a debate highlight I remember, and I specifically remember that I thought we lost because I was so like over focused on the little details of what we actually missed and what we could have done better, that I didn't realize that we did a lot of stuff well. And I kept like watching the debate because it was streamed. I
Yeah.
kept watching it again after the debate to find out whether we win or lose. But
Not again.
we had a
During
much
during the debate. This man watched during the debate while the CO whip was talking. He winded back the recording. He was like, "Bro, we're out. We're definitely out here." I'm like, "What are you talking about? We're not out. This for real happened." Yes, I even forgot about this. Sorry for interrupting you. I just had to digress.
Another funny thing with me and Roman, that there are some situations at every tournament where there is this one round where I'm absolutely confident that we are winning the round, and he's absolutely confident that we are fourthing, and the other way around where he's absolutely confident that we're winning and I think that we're losing. And it the funny theme around it is that I think 99% of the time the person who thinks that we're winning is right. So that's an interesting overlap here.
So, I guess one of the things that you guys started to be known for around this time is basically being one of the few stylistic teams left. So, if you ask like anyone to list three things about Niki as a speaker, style would be one of them. And there are like so many dinos who constantly say like Sophia is one of the few teams that still has style left in modern debating. So I'm curious whether this was a conscious thing that you tried to develop or work on for a large amount of time. Both style and scamming and being rhetorical and emotively powerful. And I'm also curious, of course, it is a fact that it works, but I'm curious from the perspective of a judge, whether you think judges should credit style or those elements of subjective persuasion more, especially since it's one of the things you are very strong at. I'm curious about your perspective about this.
um I don't think it was conscious. We never particularly worked on it. I think maybe like Roman worked on it when he was with Alec, and maybe he can talk about more on that. From my perspective, like I guess this is like going back to what I said of like having some natural inclinations towards debating. I think this was something where when when I took a break from debating and came back, I was able to like open my Sharingan and really see the debate much clearer. And I think at that point, I was able to feel much more confident in a debate round to know what's going on, and not really feel like all of the time feeling, even when I was losing, I kind of felt like I know why I was losing. Most of the time, sometimes it was just a weird situation, but it felt like I knew what was going on and it felt like I had control. And when that happened, a lot of my natural inclination towards being able to like be more stylistic and stuff like that kind of I was able to utilize much better because I wasn't worrying so much about doing the other stuff correctly, and I could like sprinkle in some of my magic, if you can if I can say it like that. um I think that's one of the things. So I don't think like we, as a team, we didn't ever work on it specifically. I think what's interesting as analysis on us in general, and I think that I've talked about this with some of the big dinos and stuff like that. I think it's just that we have character. Like our journey to debating is, I think, very unique to our own experiences, and we've mostly figured out things in our own particular way. Obviously, we've had some help and good advice along the way, but a lot of the process has been figuring out the important stuff for ourselves. And while taking in the advice, we still did it our own way. So because we did it our own way, we gained, I think, a lot of confidence uh, in ourselves that we know what we are doing, and we can do unique things that are only we can do it in that particular way. They might not be the best, but they're definitely unique, and they're definitely how we are going to present ourselves and do it. So we quickly stopped like um, watching speakers and do it like that them. I was much more focused in my journey, and I think Rumen is like that to a certain extent, although with first speech is a little bit different maybe, but I was mostly focused on being the best version of myself as compared to being like person X or Y or Z, which inevitably meant that I had my own moments of like style and things like that, because it does feel unique within the round. And also like I've always felt grounded and conscious of why what are we doing right now. So I've never shied away from the big moments, and just if we were in an out round and a big moment, I mostly embrace it. So this is mostly talking from my perspective, but when I embrace it, it allows me to do fun stuff. And when I enjoy myself, most of the time people are more likely to enjoy listening to me as well. Is what I found out, and why it's like stylistic. So I think it's mostly like who we are as people that creates the style, and not necessarily like a particular method of being stylistic. Nobody really sat down and told us this is how you improve your style, and we I don't think that while we exchange some ideas about it, I don't think we necessarily, it's not something manufactured, and it's not something necessarily um, we were in full control of. Just kind of happened from my perspective. I want to hear Roman's perspective on this in particular, because I think his stylistic journey is a bit different for sure.
Yeah, it is just I think one thing that you said before that people need to understand that debating is theater. It is not a mathematical equation or an operation or something like that. And yes, to a certain extent, you need to engage in a role. So if you're debating the socialist perspective in a motion, you should become the socialist. But it should still be you who is the socialist, right? And to a large extent, debaters fall trap of this very monotone way of debating, rather than engaging in what they are. So, for example, you and me, we sound like Balkan criminals, and that's our vibe. Tejas, you also sound like the crazy Indian when you are debating, which I personally love a lot. But this is to a large extent the whole point, that you need to a certain extent, be brave to be you, and the game really becomes a lot more fun when you do it. But on my personal journey with style, let's call it like that, to a large extent, by Korea, I wasn't particularly stylistic. The main thing which I focused on was being understandable and counter scamming. So telling the judge, if you buy this, you're an idiot. This was the full length of my style. And when I debated with Alec, we were like the technical team. Like we would debate very, very technically, listen to where the analysis ends, fill it up, stuff like that. But honestly, I tried to work on it. In the beginning, I was very cringe. Like you remember me trying to do those drills where you tell me give me a emotional intro on this, and I just talk like a robot. I wonder if this is recorded somewhere. I should probably post it sometime. I know I did like 15 prime minister speeches where I am emotional in them, and I'm particularly using brackets because you really can't tell it. That are on my Google Drive. I may paste some of them after this so that people can watch it. It may be funny, but I really cracked the code more when in-person debating started to come back, because that was the moment where I, for example, could start walking around. I could look at the judge in the eyes, look at what they're doing. I could look at my opponents. I really like doing this, going physically close to my opponents to intimidate them, and all of these things really allowed me to find my version of what the style is, which by Madrid really fostered. So even though in the beginning I wasn't very stylistic, with time and not necessarily forcing it, but like letting it naturally grow, did it happen, uh, and I was able to cultivate it.
That makes sense. So I want to ask about two other experiences, or a couple of other experiences. One of them is you mentioned earlier that HWS helped motivate your return from retirement. So tell me about your experience at HWS and how it offered what you said was like a motivation or an anger or a need to sort of return to debating.
Okay, so I think the for me the main moment, it was definitely one particular moment where I had like the worst away of my life. I'm not gonna say the judge, but they were definitely like it's firstly like, okay, obviously I believe that the call was wrong. In the two panel scenario, also the other panel believed that the call was wrong. So let's start with there. I'm already frustrated about this, but that's like life. You know, I've done enough debates at that stage that I can go with that. But the way that the OA was presented was, I feel horrible, honestly. There were like jokes being made. There were just like things like, oh, you guys did that, but it just didn't work. That's life. Deal with it. Like very casual way of going about it, which really frustrated me because like, okay, I'm okay with like not being able to convince the judge, but it felt like they weren't even trying to be convinced, and it felt like really biased and things like that, and it really made me mad because I felt like I was basically disrespected. And on the street, if this happens, I go fight the person. In this scenario, you can't because it's not Bulgaria. But I don't like being disrespected. You know, that's that's a big problem with me, and I felt disrespected. So I was like, I had this moment of like just being angry, just being like fuck debating, and then it was immediately filled in with the need to actually debate again. So literally the next day over lunch, I said to Roman, "Hey, you wanna ask Zagreb if there's still spots for Euros, and then we can do Euros." And I expected him to be much more. Oh, I don't know, it's right next to Worlds, but he actually got convinced pretty fast, which was funny to me. Because maybe if he didn't get convinced so fast, maybe it could have been just a phase. But I don't know. It kind of worked at that particular moment. So that's kind of the story. I mean, there are other moments at HWS where I felt like we didn't get the correct call, but that's like again part of debating. Like I'm fine with that. I don't have any particular bad memories about it. Just this particular round really threw me off even to this day, and it's probably like I think I mentioned this on like recent debate series posting, but like me and Rumen have never really clashed anybody at major competitions. But this would probably be the only person that I would clash again and again. And it's probably not even on them. They might be a really cool person, but just this particular OA really, really threw me off. It really pissed me off. And I would. I would not be okay being judged by them, even if it's only in my own mind, if that makes sense.
The other story I'm interested in hearing, the next story, I guess, is Zagreb Euros, and specifically, I want to hear what exactly happened in the famous Zagreb Euros quarterfinal, um, and what did you run, and how did you go through?
Okay. Okay, so Zagreb, let's see. Again, I'm trying to think of highlights. First day, we got only second places. And I'm pretty sure they were all like small robberies. And like, I don't care about saying it like this because I'm pretty convinced that we're winning these rounds, all of these three rounds on the first day, but we didn't. And all of them, it was just like close debates where I felt like we were winning, but we didn't. And like when one of these happens, it's fine. But it happened, the same thing happened three times in a row, where the judge is like, yeah, you were almost there, but we didn't get through, so you're second. You're almost there, didn't get through, you're second. When it happened three times in a row, which was essentially a worse performance than our last Euros, I was extremely, extremely frustrated. But I went back, I watched some episodes of The Office and talked with some of our friends, and was fine. Next day we were good. We got in the top room. The third day we were also pretty good. Um, there were some funny moments around it, but I think like overall the rounds went fine. I remember at break night I was kind of pissed off that we kind of got low speaks and we broke lower. We were like the lowest breaking team on 20 out of a few of our teams, which immediately we knew we weren't very high on the top. So I just remember like smoking my cigar and being like in a murderous state. Like I'm going for some heads on the next day. Um, so first round, which was the ESL quarter, no, the open quarter. Yeah, I think the open quarter because it was open quarter ESL semi then. So open quarter was it was a porn motion, but it was like, do you remember the exact wording, Romana?
I think commercialization of porn or something like that, or
Yeah,
access.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, so something like that, like commercialization of porn, blah blah. Um, so we are CG the,
Okay.
again. I think CG again. A lot of CGs that particular tournament. So we're CG. Essentially, so I'm gonna tell it from my perspective, and then Ruben can say it from his. So immediately from the prep time, we were very what the fuck, because back then we weren't really comfortable with this more um how can I say it more like controversial motions or not so basic motions and things like that. And also like it's a motion that it feels like kind of two-dimensional. It feels fairly shallow. So we were very struggling to figure out an extension. I think at that point what happened was we kind of got we kind of panicked. It felt like we were panicking and we were very ineffective in prep time. One of the few times that has happened to us, honestly. I can't remember many times that it has happened to us, especially after that. It I think never really did. Um, but yeah, we did panic and we couldn't really figure out something, and we just kind of went in the round with like, okay, we're gonna figure it out. I think essentially, in terms of arguments, if I remember correctly, so OG stands up I think it's Oxford. They run like the general case, which is like um, women being abused and things like that. I don't remember like the gist of it, but just like commercialization is generally bad for women. I think I don't really remember what they run in so precisely. Maybe Rumana, do you remember?
It was
Oh
again the general case in the opposite direction. Like it's good for women, or maybe
yeah, yeah,
neither of us
something like
remember.
that. So it's empowering. It's yeah, it's kind of like it's empowering to women and to people. Blah blah blah. Then it's us in CG. CO runs a king extension. Essentially, everybody can find their own king. They can find out their fantasy. It's like a little bit more out there of a case. It's fine. So the top clash is essentially uh, whether it's good or bad for women. Um, and essentially, what happens is that, at least how I remember it, maybe it's a bit drastic, but Roman has 80% derivative speech in the extension speech, uh, and I remember physically like doing signs for him to move on because he's saying derivative stuff. So maybe he can tell another story of it, but I remember he was very derivative. He had some new stuff, but mostly very derivative. And essentially, what I remember doing in that particular whip is basically breaking the clashes of top half with some real life explanation of how stuff work. So I would say it was kind of like a Tejas style of speech, if you can say it like that. Still very me way of presenting it, but it was a lot of kind of commentary of, okay, here is the actual problem. Here is how the actual issue behind the issue. Of like, and I remember specifically one of the things that I was talking about is um, how the porn industry is structured, that it's one big monopoly of a company, and essentially like what I whipped that Rumen supposedly says, which I'm not sure he does, but we're gonna hear that part of the story. But what I scammed at our cases, in my eyes, is essentially we say the reason why women can never take back porn and really have control over the industry is that the way that the industry is functioning, it's a top-down mechanism of what everybody watches, and there's essentially two parts of it. So one part is the way that it has built throughout time. So it starts with like the studios, and they own everything, and they essentially lead the way into what people are watching. So they kind of already, a lot of the porn that is out there is through the male gaze, let's say, and it's gonna stay that way. And everybody else that starts watching porn also like accepts this as the normalized version of porn. The second part of the analysis is this is especially true because a lot of these places, also with how algorithms work, control what people can view. So a lot of the time, it's very hard for you to really look at like find different porn and things like that. But it's much more about what the algorithm pushes you to watch, which a lot of the time is this particular content from the big corporations. So when you Google porn, it's mostly one or two or three websites that are owned by the same company, and they have complete control over it for the majority of it. And a lot of people are not gonna get to the porn that is female led or is has some kind of creative input by females. I think that's basically the gist of the case. So what I essentially did in that round was Rumen had a derivative extension, but still some analysis on why essentially women are put into abusive situations. And I took that and I basically scammed with actually like basically here is a few fun facts about the porn industry, and so did us. Oh, this is what we meant the whole time, and this is how actually women are getting abused and can never get away from this abusive situation. I think that's pretty much how I remember it. Maybe I gave too many details and people are confused now, but um, that's what I remember about it. Maybe Roman can add something.
No, what people need to understand is this was debate number 30 for me at the time, because I debated at Belgrade, I debated at Split, I debated 9 rounds at Zagreb, and I mentally broke. I usually can follow the debate very easily. I couldn't follow what was happening then, and somehow, by some kind of magic, you managed to carry us out of that moment. And just for people to know, 4 judges had us fourth, 1 judge had us clear first, and that one judge persuaded three of those four to make us through. So this was like Hail Mary carry at the time. Like there is nothing close to this, or at least nothing that maybe MDG and Sirzansky semifinal from 2016 is closest analogy to this whole situation. Yeah.
So I want to jump into Madrid Worlds. And at this point, through the podcast, we've heard a lot about your Madrid Worlds run. But I'm very curious about one thing, which is on Rumen's podcast, he said that the most meaningful run to him was the semifinal. And you said the most meaningful run to you was round 8. So I want to understand what your case was from CO arguing against immortality and why it meant so much to you.
I just think that's like so the context is the following. This is one of those rounds which I personally believe it's much more about the theater and the style. It's really about like the analysis, especially with like having Ateneo in opening opposition, which we need to extend off, and they're gonna have like 5 arguments, and each of these arguments is gonna be fairly well positioned, and it's gonna be analyzed to a certain extent. So they're gonna catch everything that is like obvious about the motion. But we knew that from the start and we didn't really care so much about it. So I asked Rumen very simply, what would you do in that position? Would you prefer to be immortal or not? And he said that I don't want to be immortal because it's for me it feels like everything is gonna be meaningless. Why would I continue moving and things like that? um, and essentially the whole idea of the argument is really simple. The only reason that you push towards getting over the hump of the inevitable hump that you're going to face in any type of journey and development when you're going to become a good debater, a doctor, economist, any type of profession or any kind of success you want, you're gonna face certain hurdles and humps, and the better you want to become, the harder they are. And the only reason that you still push through those humps and don't give up is that you're already locked in into that path to a certain extent, but also you know that it's very hard to start again and again and again. And when you're immortal, there's always like basically infinite amount of paths that you can take, and it's very likely that once you take one path and you get to the hurdle, it's gonna hurt you so much. It's not gonna be a pleasant experience. You're just gonna give up because you know there's infinite more things that you can try and still have fun with it. And the gist of that case, which is something that really hits personal to me, and it hits to our debate journey, and I almost cried when listening to Roman's speech in that round because he did use our debate journey as an example, is that the only way to get the real emotion and the best out of the experience is by gaining that perspective of getting over the hurdle. And if you don't go through the bad times, you're not going to cherish the good times the same way. It's not going to feel the same way. It's not going to matter to you the same way. It's not going to be worth it the same way. So essentially, we claimed that through immortality, you're going to experience a lot of things, but nothing is gonna be a huge true experience that's really one to live for or to die for in these particular cases. And that's the gist of the case. I think it's a very real case, but it's also it feels like a case that only we can do, honestly. um, this is and I'm very sad that it wasn't recorded, because I honestly think that while maybe some other teams might think of similar ideas, the way that we presented it is very personal and very to our own particular experience and kind of personal life philosophies, that it was very unique, and that's why it was my favorite round. It was also my favorite round because it was a similar position than what we just lost in the Euros final, which was another moment where you need to kind of it's not only about analysis but kind of explaining an emotion and really talking about something that's personal to you, why you value life. And we had like it was a round two of doing that. And yeah, like I was just like very emotional in that particular moment. So like it was very very high energy debate for me. Like I was giving out middle fingers to some teams. I told the Aussie team that I can fuck them on the table if they wanted to prove a certain point in rebuttal. I don't even remember what's the point, but it was definitely interesting place to be, for sure, in that particular room. And yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
So I want to move now to some spicier topics to get some hot takes out of you. So I guess the first question that I want to ask is, there's been this discussion in debating for probably over a decade now about whether motions should be set just based on whether they are deep and balanced and interesting, or whether there should also be some sort of equity considerations when it comes to setting motions. So my question for you is it possible for a balanced, deep, interesting motion to be too inequitable to set? Or do you think, like equity is not a criteria we should use when it comes to setting motions, and we should go the sort of route that some people have called dangerous spaces debating?
Yeah, definitely. I think that equity shouldn't be a part of it. I think equity's part is legitimate, and it should allow people to, first of all, push people to not make assumptions and to be careful with their words while they're in the particular debate. It should also allow for individuals to express certain grievances and to also, if they wish, to opt out of the particular debate. But these two are not reasons why we shouldn't debate the particular motion in the first place, even though it might lead to these things. Because if that is the logic that we're going behind, then probably any type of motion is going to trigger somebody in a particular way. We just arbitrarily have set certain standards for it. But in reality, a lot of different things and motions trigger people. Like I think this has been already mentioned on the podcast, but even though there are certain issues where we kind of as debating community agree that this is going to be hard on a particular group of people, there are always issues that we don't think about. And I'm not here to judge which one is more traumatic experience for another person, but that's exactly the point. We can't. So the only way to be consistent, and for debaters I think this is important, to be logically consistent with how we set up our perspective, it's important to debate everything. And if that is triggering, and if a certain motion, for example, showcases that the debating community is in fact sexist, the debating community is in fact racist, that person X, Y, or Z is actually capable of making this problematic analysis. I think this is better because then it allows us to have the conversation as the community of what is problematic, have an actual examples of what's going on. It also allows us to move forward and to become better, to show people this is how it shouldn't be done. This is exactly why we need equity, for example, and things like that. But it's important. And I think finally, just it will allow for a lot of more people to be in debating. And debating in itself is valuable because it allows for people with different types of backgrounds to um, express themselves and to exchange ideas. And this is how, like, you actually have certain level of change even within individuals, which in many cases is enough. So for me, this is the most problematic, that when you're protecting group X, you're inevitably alienating groups Y, even if it's not directly correlated, it still is. So it sets a bad precedent to equity certain types of motions. Obviously, this doesn't mean that you cannot still, when you understand that when you're setting a motion, it could trigger people, it could be problematic, you obviously can take certain measures to alleviate that, to prepare people, to do all the things that you need to do. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be said. Because in reality, people are still going to talk about these motions. We cannot escape the world that is resolving around us. And even if people don't want to pretend that abortion isn't a debate, and like, I come from a country where one of the first countries in Europe abortion has been legal. It's not a real issue here, but it's many places it is. And from my perspective, it's not a debate, but for many other people it is. And it's intellectually
Yeah.
dishonest for me to pretend that this is not the case. It's essentially absolutely derived from reality for me to pretend that this is not an actual debate to be had, not only about abortion but any types of motions like this. And even if we don't debate them, it doesn't fucking matter. People are still gonna talk about them. And guess what? If you still believe that some debaters at least are going out into this world of ours and are trying to convince people, are having everyday life conversations. Maybe some of them become politicians, maybe some of them become journalists or something like that. They're involved in the uh, communities that they are in, and they are talking persons of these communities. Then that means that it's has like a pragmatic benefit to actually debate these things right now, because it's still a fairly safe space, especially compared to a lot of other spaces that you can have. If you go on the internet on
Yeah.
4chan, something like that, it's gonna be a much more problematic. That's how I feel about it.
I agree. And one other perspective that I have, observing the Indian circuit and India more generally, is a lot of societies at trials, at this sort of thing, sort of expect you to know all about equity norms before you even enter a debate club. And I often ask, isn't this what a debate club is for? To sort of teach people who are less exposed to understanding what equity is or how to keep a community safe. And one of the effects it has in the Indian circuit is it ends up being classist, because the people who might have exposure to sort of more liberal or socially progressive ideas or on these questions are often people who have, who've spent a lot of time on the internet, spent a lot of time engaging Western media. And so it ends up that it makes debate societies more elitist, thus doing sort of the opposite of what you are trying to accomplish. So, just from the Indian perspective, that's one of the things I've noticed, which is, of course, promoting equity and like making debate a more equitable space is a good thing, but you can't expect people to come in having like already these refined sort of like equitable notions of how things should work. And if you want to have an open space, you should have a space that's open for them to present their perspective as well. I have a related question, which is about liberal or left of center bias in debating. Now, I think all three of us would agree that this bias exists and it's probably a bad thing. Of course, we may have different views, like I'm a liberal, but I do agree that this bias exists and it's a bad thing. But one interesting question that I do have is, do you think this bias overall has gotten worse or better? Because I've noticed a lot of people on the podcast say it's gotten worse, and that might be true in some places. But I've also personally noticed more people are willing to make conservative arguments, or it used to be a thing that, in debates about social movements, everyone would just debate assuming the social movements are good. And I've seen more and more debaters try to challenge that sort of assumption. So I'm just curious, like, do you think it has unilaterally gotten worse? Do you think there are places where progress has happened? Like, how pessimistic or optimistic are you about this issue of left of center bias in debating?
Personally, I think it has gotten a bit better. Like, if me and Norman can go up and make a quite right case in the open semis of worlds and go through unanimously, then some things are better for sure. I think it kind of also depends on the particular like generation of debaters. What kind of arguments are the top debaters making? What kind of arguments are the top judges buying and stuff like that. So from that perspective, I think there is light in the tunnel. I think though, if we have to be honest, a lot of the ways and the policies that the debating community is set up and the expectation imposed on people with how majors work, with how certain like overall international competitions work, the expectations on them. Uh, this is not exactly true. It's very much like protected liberal space, and it's very hard for the average right wing debater to exist without um, essentially facing a lot of difficulties. And I think also like a lot of conversations should be had on how we structure our whole debating community. I think like let's be honest. I don't think uh, this is necessarily bad, but right now, for example, of how we choose um, CAs for competitions, we also look into some type of like almost like a diversity quota per se, and this is I think is never a conversations that the debating community truly had. It was never a conversation to be had, which I think is problematic. But also, while it's not necessarily bad, in some cases it can be. So there needs to be some like better version of it where we are not just putting people to meet a diversity quota. I think, like for example, I talk a lot of with a lot of women on the podcast, and they've said it themselves that just because people feel they need to fill a particular women's quota on a CA team, they'll just start asking the same people without actually anything changing. So this is like obviously this is not necessarily working. So there has to be a conversation in a better way, and I think the expectance should be that we still look at things such as merit and so on, because I fear that if you're an outsider and you look at our community, you would say uh, unrealistic stuff such as this person has got these achievements because maybe they are a woman. And this is an argument that people in the real world make. Again, like this is my point. You might not like it, you might not think it's true, but it's an argument that people in the real world make, and some debaters make. It is real life. You can touch it. It's out there. Even if you don't see it in your own community of five people, it exists. So we need to have conversations about this for how it should work, like with like what's equity's involvement into all of these things in order to be better and to be more inclusive, and especially on what are certain levels of expectation towards people. But I think we're in the right direction, and it feel like I don't know. We are still allowing for a lot of different arguments to be made. It's just you just need to be active about it in terms of when you see problematic behavior with the good cause of diversity, for example, to also call it out, even though it's for the good cause of diversity, for example, or anything else really, because it's equally important to also navigate this space in that way as it is to also be a welcoming space where everybody can interact with each other. That makes sense.
So my next question, and this is a question you've asked some people on the show before, and I want to hear your take. How do you think you should compare 2016 debaters versus 2023 debaters? Or more broadly, do you think debating has improved over time, both at the average level and at the top?
I think Milos said this recently very well. It was very funny because the way that he meant it uh, was true, but it also kind of exposed the problem behind it. So he said, I feel like, okay, like I'm not officially quoting him on it, maybe he can say he meant different thing, but this is what I understood. He said, I feel like in 2016 there was much worse analysis, but much better rebuttal. And now there is much better analysis and much worse rebuttal. And he said it confidently, and I kind of agree. But if you think about what this means, it's interchangeable, correct? It's obviously harder to rebut things that are much better analyzed. And by the nature of people analyzing things more, it means that people will gradually get worse at rebuttal, especially on the average in terms of that. And it because a problem that has been a concern from some of the dinos is, well, a lot of debates have become, we say our stuff, they say their stuff, and then the judge has to decide. And I think the problem is to some extent with that, because I think what Sirizansky and a lot of other people agree with is that the average debater has become much better, and it's increasingly becoming better because the resources and the available things that you can do online especially are so much more that anybody can start from the bottom and get here, in a sense, if that makes sense, as much as we did. So now, if we all kind of agree, at least the people who like are not complete egocentrics about it, we all agree that the top, highest echelon, top debaters of 2016 and all of the other and now are probably gonna perform very well in both scenarios. Then definitely, if then we can agree that the average debater is much better than the average debater back then, it's obvious the 2023 debaters are better. It's just mathematically true. If you can put it like that. It's also true that the average judge is better because they also have these resources and a lot of things have been standardized. Many of these things have been prompted up and brought and are because of 2016 debaters. But in general, 2023 debaters are better. This is a fact of life. Everything else is your own version of reality and how you approach this argument, but it doesn't matter. And again, I don't believe that the top debaters, the only argument that you can make against this is, but top debaters back then were better. Again, depends on the meta of debating and what is persuaded. Like, this is what I've been saying. Like, people think me and Roman have a good style. In my opinion, me and Roman are good debaters and have a good style because of who we are and how we became to be, and nobody can take that away from us. So, regardless of the meta, we're still gonna do our thing. In whatever meta that you put us, maybe we're not going to dominate it. That's not the point. but we're going to be good in our own way. And that's mostly true for a lot of these other debaters, starting from Shen Wuli to Ashish to Harish to Dan Lahaf and things like that. So that's not going to change. But I still believe that on average, aggregately, as with any other sport in the world, 2023 debaters are better. So that's my take on this particular point. Is it
Okay.
controversial
Now
enough?
I'm going to jump into the Now I'm going to jump into the final segment, which is of course the goat conversation. So the question, as always, is how do you approach this conversation? And of course, who is the goat?
Okay. So on the approach side, I actually haven't thought about this answer, and specifically didn't want to think about it because I want it to be from the heart. So from the heart, I am the greatest debater of all time. Here is why. Um, I think I've told this to a few debaters when they've asked me about this. I think when you're competing and you're actively competing, you should actively believe that you're the greatest debater of all time and you're the greatest debater in the particular room. I think this is the best mindset that many like great sports people have had throughout history, and it's a right mentality to have. And I think it also has some truth to it to the extent in which if you're able to achieve similar achievements and you are the one who actually has epistemic access to your own circumstances, you're much more able to appreciate, let's say from my perspective, Rumen's story or my own story and how we came to be. Then let's say Shen Wuli's story because I didn't know Shen Wuli personally and only hear kind of like certain stories about him. So this is my approach to this general conversation, and until I completely retire, this is gonna be my official answer. So they like you can hate all you want in the comments. I'm sticking with that. Now, to still not like have absolute um, no content, I will like name um, an actual goat or like an actual like meaning another goat in my perspective. So let's see. I didn't think so much about this, but I think there's probably three contenders in my head. It's Harish, Shenwuli, and Dan Lahaf. And the way that I can approach this is by kind of saying, okay, um, what I particularly value in the debater is the most important. So this is how I'm going to place the goat. I think on the two sides we have Dan Lahaf on one end, which I think is probably the most like technically speaking the greatest debater of all time. Like understanding and having like a mathematical approach to the game in general and structuring everything. On the other side, we have Shen Wuli, who also like similarly has a great sense of structure and what needs to be done, but is also very impressive in the particular moments and to like emotionally charging arguments and things like that. And this is what he's famous about. I think like Down Half is very famous on framing and on like very particular debates on out framing certain things. With Chen Wuli, you always think of that particular speech in that final. I think in the middle you have Harish, who kind of marries both to a certain extent, uh, but also probably doesn't do any of it better. That doesn't mean he can't be on par in a particular debate. But I feel like Harish is more of like a jack of all trades of like the gold capabilities, if that makes sense. Which I particularly value a lot because then you can be put into different situations. So in my heart, I would say probably if I knew him, I would say Shenmue, because Shenmue is probably the closest to what I most like about debating. But from what I've seen, it has. I probably have to say Harish, because I think that while he probably, I'm not sure that he can give the most powerful speech that we're always gonna remember for all times, and I'm not sure that he's gonna be 100% of the time the best frame and strategy in the round. But most of the time he's gonna be able to do both, and he's gonna have his moments with both. And I think that's like the best you can ask for. Like, the question would be like, if you need 10 rounds to be won, if you need 9 rounds to be won over a period of time, which can you do? And this is something that I personally like about me and Rumen, is that we are flexible. Even though we are known as stylistic team, we are actually pretty good with the strategy, with the outframing, with this particular stuff. We just are able to execute differently based on the circumstances. So I'll probably, based on this, have to say Harish, even though my heart speaks Shenmue.
So I have one question, which is before we conclude, which is you've been hosting this podcast for a while now, and I'm both curious what you've taken away the most from it and what your favorite moments in this podcast were. If you had to name like two or three moments that really spoke to you as an interviewer, what were they?
Okay, let's see. So maybe start with the takeaway. What I think on the back of my head on the moments. General takeaway is I can't believe how much we are not like new debaters have almost like a lot of them don't have a good connection with old debaters. And it seems like knowledge and experience is kind of lost. And now this is like with the existence of online debating and with so many materials and resources on debating, the knowledge part in terms of how to debate is getting much better and you have access to that. But it feels like we as a community, most of us don't even know our own tales, you know, and this is like weird to me, and it should be better, like, because you once you get over like the debating part, you also like start cherishing the part of like being part of a community and things like that. And it's it seems like this is an integral part of feeling like you're really part of the community, knowing all the stories, knowing about the particular peoples, the goods and the bads, remembering the stories about Chennai worlds, or remembering the stories about this particular debate, or that things, kind of like these commonalities, which uh, I feel like in any other community exist, but in ours they kind of get lost through time, and especially with like COVID and stuff like that. So I feel like this is the niche that we can feel here, which is like with these conversations, people can go back to it and um, kind of take away something from it. And I hope that this contributes to the general feeling of being part of a community that people can have, and the feeling that I also kind of made me go back to debating, which was understanding that there is more to it. There is more to your club in your small town, or your university, or your country. There are other more people out there. So what you're doing, even if it feels small, or it feels like you're not being understood, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of more people out there that are doing the exact same thing. And this kind of something that helped me a lot, and I feel like it can help some other people as well. So I hope like this is the main takeaway. Like, it's how I've rationalized doing this and why I personally enjoy it. So for me, this is the main takeaway of like this is a problem that the community has. This is what the podcast has to offer for it. Um,
And in terms of your favorite,
moments. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see. Let's see. So there are a few cool moments. So I actually really enjoyed. I think Sirizansky podcast is very spicy. I see that like a lot of people don't know who Sirizansky is, uh, but he's actually I think like one of the like really smart people in debating, but also still has that flair to him and his own personal style. Like same with Helena, I would say, but just I want to mention these particular ones because um, for me it was a big moment because I've only heard the stories. This was kind of like part of what I already talked about, but having to actually sit down with them and talk about this stuff has been great. And I think that they're also like quite undervalued in terms of like actual views on the channel, but also people knowing of them, especially with now so many people in DSL community around the world feeling a sense of camaraderie to each other, because it's like it feels like the good times of DSL community, and these were one of the people that kind of broke the ceiling in the bad times for the DSL community. So I think these are some highlights of like just back in the day, the little Niki couldn't even imagine like having that conversation, regardless of whether it's on the podcast or something else. And I was actively like shy, and for me, they felt like celebrities that I couldn't go up to even ask for a picture. And now we can just sit down and talk, and that's cool. I think another highlight would be a Shish podcast, like because it like obviously like finding out that he has this like big channel on YouTube that I completely was not aware of directly on the podcast was pretty funny. um, but I think also like just immersing myself into that experience and that conversation was something that I didn't expect to. I was kind of tired. I had like some other plans for the day, but I know Ashish was busy, so I kind of powered through, and it was so worth it to listen to that conversation. So it was definitely a highlight to mention, and like just more moments like totally didn't expect you're gonna talk about animals for like 20-30 minutes on the podcast, which was very fun. It's just like like this is why we're doing this. Like this is so fun. We can talk about other stuff. Obviously, like I think Harish podcast was fun. I think the Milsh podcast was also a highlight because I was kind of this whole conversations that we talked about was the inspiration for this. So yeah, these are to name a few highlights, but I'm pretty happy with all of the episodes so far, and I wouldn't take any of them back.
so of course I'm going to give you a space to promote whatever you want to promote, but I do just want to say one thing, which is thank you so much for giving us this podcast, for organizing tournaments, and for continuing giving back to the debate community well after you're done. I know this episode has taken a while, but I do think you deserved having these 2 hours to talk to us, and I, along with many other people, are super grateful to you. But as always, we will conclude by giving you your space to promote whatever you want, say whatever you want, whatever your takeaway is, anything that you like.
Romana, should we promote it here? I feel like it's a good place to announce.
We could keep it ambiguous, or we could keep it. We could say it as it is. Your call. Your call, sir.
I'm not sure when this is gonna be out, so it probably doesn't matter even. But
Okay.
yeah, let's go with it. I don't care. So the thing that I will promote is the Sofia bid for Worlds in 2026. which is slowly more and more likely to happen. It's not official yet, but we are thinking about it and are very deep into developing most of the important stuff. So unless something very bad happens to us, it is most likely going to be an official bid, and we feel like it's gonna be the greatest shit ever. And just like the culmination of it all. I think that like it feels like my and probably Rumen's swan song into debating, and then we can evaporate forever and then just leave this random podcast for future debaters to laugh at our jokes.
Now, it will
So
be very
that's
funny if we fail, man. If for some reason it doesn't happen, people will watch this and laugh at us.
yeah, but that's part of the journey, you know.
Yeah,
Like then we can tell the story of how we felt, because that's also been quite the theme throughout this podcast. So I'm at this point definitely not afraid of failure.
yeah.
Everything happens for a reason.
All right. Thank you
Cool.
so much for having me to interview you. And thanks so much for this.